Divas, which title is going to take home the Booker Prize this year of our Lord and Savior 2025? Who's to say? Before we get started, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your enemies. I'm having fun. I hope you're having fun. I want to keep having fun. Let's get to it. So I thought it might be fun for us to do like a deep dive into the shortlist as we approach the announcement, which is taking place on November 10th, 2025. Y'all, this has been a bit of a Sophie's choice. I thought I knew, then I went to the gym and I argued with myself like while I was lifting, and here we are. So listen, I have like a planned out substantiation to discuss like each of the titles. I'm not going to lie to you. Going into this video, I haven't fully like made up my mind. Is that bad? I don't know. Let's do this together, right? Also, I sometimes think it's fun to argue with myself. Y'all seem to think it's fun when I argue with myself. So I thought, let's create a video where I'm arguing with myself. Okay. I do want to like get this all out in the open first. There are 6 titles. Yes? For me, 2 of these titles are not in the running for me. Again, Gabby Wood did a great job when they announced the shortlist to talk about like, we're all reading different books, even though they're all the same. So like, I want to hold space if these are some that you think are going to win or some that do win, because who am I, right? It's just the way that these books resonated with me or didn't when I read them. Okay, first up, I think to almost no one's surprise, The Rest of Our Lives, to me, is not a contender for the winner. Listen, I respect this group of judges. I feel like the way that they've spoken about these books makes a lot of sense to me. I think there's a lot of passion there. I have a lot of respect for the panel. So they saw something in this on multiple reads that maybe I didn't see because that's not how I read the book. Great. Okay. They made that decision. To me, that I'd be shocked if that took home the prize. So for today's video, I'm not going to argue with myself about this one. I do listen. It made me intrigued to reread it to see like what did they find in their reread that like drew them in. It's a little tricky for me because I do think that there were some others that like on a reread I would anticipate giving you more than the reread of this, but listen, to each their own. So, okay, The Rest of Our Lives, which to me is not a contender. Now this one, I'm not surprised that it was shortlisted because of the internet and the way people spoke about this book. But I did not. It was not on my like shortlist wish list, right? And that is Flashlight. Beautiful at the sentence level. Beautiful. The way they were strung together didn't quite work. I also think that I saw an interview with the author where she said like she didn't know that the characters were going to be XYZ, either maybe like more combative or like the way that they were. And listen, whatever their process is their process. Like it's not a commentary on that. But I do feel like for me, that was present in my experience with these characters. It did feel a little like unexpected and maybe like shoehorned in a way. Yeah, and so to hear them say that, it was kind of like, oh, that was the reading experience that I had, and I didn't enjoy that. That was part of what I didn't enjoy about this. I also felt like the relationships, because of the types of characters and the people that they were, that all kind of melded together in their general way that they moved through life. It was really hard to like piece out like a driving empathy or like a driving need or want to continue to engage with those characters. I think that there are some, some very intelligent folks who have some interesting counter arguments. There was like an interesting counter argument in a book club that I was in, that like each individual kind of like represents, different countries and their strained and tricky relationships. And I think that again is like an interesting concept, but the execution is what is always falling short for me in some of these arguments. I think that like folks can see it very differently, but I've not had anyone communicate how those counterpoints are being executed against in a way that negates my experience. And maybe they don't have to, right? I think my biggest thing is that like sometimes, especially I've noticed with this book, when there's like engagement and like dialogue about it, folks like need to be right. And like, you like the book. Plenty of people do. I may be the idiot, but like, I don't need to be right. But I haven't been convinced with any other substantiation. So, because part of my reason for not liking it is the execution, like the fundamental execution of the stories and the way they're being told. So, it's just a miss for me. And that's just a me thing. And that's fine if it's a me problem. It's fine if it wins, right? Like, there were, I think, other titles last year that I was really impassioned about, other than the winner, for sure with the international booker. So listen, and I think what gets tricky too at this point, especially now that we're going to start talking about these four that I feel passionately about, it's at some point it becomes like an opinion, right? And like how what Gabby said, like that individual or these individuals on the panel are engaging in how they are reading these works at a specific time. Also, I think by this point, haven't they had like to get them on the long list, they read them, to get them on the short list, they read them, and then I think they read the short list again. So they've read some of these, I think, at least 3 times. And so like they're also going to have a different intimate relationship with some of the works than I do. Clearly, right? So anyways, so for me, Flashlight, which I keep, and Simon and I on all of our voice notes, because we buddy read that one, would call it Fleshlight. It happened. That's what we called it. And I'm not the only one. I've heard other people say that on the internet. So that one and The Rest of Our Lives to me are just kind of like not up for like my winner. Now, there's also an interesting conversation too, like who's my winner, who do I think, and then who do I think is gonna win. Second, like trying to read the mind of the judges stresses me out. Also picking amongst these, which I feel like a little Sophie's choice, stresses me out. But let me start with The Land in Winter. Okay. So, the prose, Gorgine. Listen, there's a new cover coming out. Oh, is it the US cover? Somebody else. Yes, because I think that this was out in the UK. I think it's out in the US maybe on the 11th of this month. And that cover is amazing. I may need to get another copy. I loved the prose of this. I loved it. I will say, and just a quick shout out. There may be some spoilers in this. I feel like we've done a deep dive without spoilers. So if you want to go spoiler less, there's that video. But I do think talking about some of the mechanics of these are going to be important, I think, for having a robust dialogue and conversation about it. So we might dig into a little bit of like just minor spoiler territory. We're not going to go like major spoiler territory, but minor. And so what I'll do too is I'll make sure that the video has the like chapters, so you can skip if you like haven't read Audition yet and you don't want to hear me talk about it. You can skip that way. Okay, so. The Land in Winter. I loved the prose. I actually loved the story. I thought that there was a lot of gorgeous, beautiful themes that were explored in very subtle ways. It just like with just such a deft hand, and I thought it was so lovely. Like there were certain things that were just almost nodded and winked at, but like very present. It was just expertly done. However, my copy, it's page 246, and it's Thursday, January 10th. Thursday, the 10th of January. This is when Irene, remember, she gets on the train and she's taking the train, and the train like stops. I think that there's like a blockage on the tracks. And so everyone's like walking, right? And she stumbles, and then she like wakes up in this entry, again, my page 246, and she is like in this home, I think for girls, that, if I'm being very, very picky, because I love this book, the way we got into that like home with Irene, and we had the Miss Watkins interaction, and the longer she spends in this home and that time with Miss Watkins, it to me felt like a little bit of a different book. Like I would need to go back, like something about it felt like a dream, or something about it felt supernatural, or something about it just felt like I think I almost thought it was with a different character for a minute. And it just took me out, and I was like, wait, where are we? And how is all of this being handled? And then it almost kind of like left it in a very easy way. And please let me know, maybe I'm a big himbo and I totally missed it. And maybe it does work because it is some sort of dream, but I don't think it does. The house mother and the children, and you know what I mean? That is the one criticism I have. And once I just got over it and gave in to this is what we were doing, I enjoyed it okay. But getting into that, and then I think maybe even that, it was getting into it just felt really crunchy. And then a bit of the world felt crunchy. Like the world within that home with the house mother. Was it an orphanage? Do we say that word anymore? I don't think we do. But the home for young women with this house mother, I believe. It just, something about that felt a little crunchy. So if we're being hyper critical, that criticism for me might take it out of the running. Maybe. And it's hard because how are we judging this? I think it's maybe the least, I'm trying to put a giant magnifying glass on it all, and I'm trying to think about it in terms of, okay, they've read all of these books. If I were to read that, I feel again, right, as the judges do, I feel like that would again be a stumbling block for me, and it would be something in my head that I was waiting for. I'd be you know what I mean? Oh, okay. So next up, and again, we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants, so I'm not going to be arguing with myself through this whole thing, so be ready. Okay, Audition by the diva Miss Katie Kitamura. I'm obsessed with her, and y'all, I went to go see her speak. She is the kindest, most generous. It was beautiful. She did a bit of a reading, and then she spoke to everyone who had come. I think some of them were students. It was at Columbia University. Some were students, some were not. And she was just so kind and so warm, and it was fun. She had had yammered on and on about how much I love this book on all these videos, and she had like recognized me, so we had a nice little chat. I think on this channel I realized that this book was signed. I think I got it I got it in Seattle, I think. Oh, why can I not think of the name of it? Bay Books, East Bay Books, something Books. We'll put the name of it there. And it was like signed, but I got her. So if you've read this, there are two distinct parts, right? And I got her to sign part 2. So I thought that was kind of like fun. And she wrote a very, very kind note. So I knew that I wanted to read it a second time. And one of the questions I asked her, though, was, what should I take with me in this second reading? How did you envision the book, right? Like, how did you envision the book? And how can I take your vision with me as I read this the second time? And she said that she thought of the work as this photo, which is a rabbit duck, like a visual trick, I guess. There's probably a better word for that. And the idea is that you're able to hold multiple realities at once, right? Because if you shift the way you look at this image, you see the duck. If you shift the way you look at the image, you see the rabbit. But then, what would happen if you could kind of blur your eyes or kind of step back a little bit and see both at once? And so that was what she talked about, how she wrote this book or thought of this book. And so I took that with me when I read it, and it really opened up a lot of the work for me in a new way. And I feel like specifically the first half, what's fascinating is that, yes, in a meta way, I think she's talking about parts 1 and parts 2 being the rabbit and the duck, but also you'll notice if you read it again or if you have read it, spoiler alert, I do think it is a book that is worth a reread. It doesn't take that much time. Because I think it's so complex. And so because of that, I do think that if you take that image with you, you'll notice that even within the scenes in part 1, that is true. And you can see even the characters are exploring that duality in every scene, in every situation. And it's either it's a duality of role. It's also a duality of scene. It's a duality of interactions. It's really fascinating, a duality of dynamics. And I think it's at the end of chapter 5 where part 1, chapter 5, the end of that. And I think this might've been what she read at the reading. I need to look back at my notes, but I don't think I wrote down what it was. I think you'll see this in multiple chapters throughout, or multiple sections throughout the work, but this line in particular. And I thought that it was true that a performance existed in the space between the work and the audience, that it existed and was made in that space of interpretation. That to me is kind of the thrust of this book. And it keeps going. But then I also thought that if ever an actor had lost sight of the shore, then it was this one. He had stumbled deep into the interior, and I wondered if he worried that he would never find his way out, if the world of fiction had lost its protective powers, the line between reality and invention undone. That is this work. Yeah? I do feel like the first part really firmly captures the rabbit duck. Then I do think when we get into part 2, it gets more meta. And I think that part 2 then becomes more of the rabbit to the duck of the part 1. Does that make sense? Where in part 1, I think that yes, you may be in the duck of it, but then you're you're duck and rabbiting in every scene, right? And kind of imagining different worlds and this, that, and the other. But then when you're in part 2, I think you're doing less of that in the minutia and more within the meta of it all. And if it does explore it in the minutia of part two, it's in more of like a bit of an absurdist way. And I think that we explore this like rabbit duck, what reality could be like in ways that are a little less like introspective and maybe a little more jarring and a little more outside of us that are like put on us. And so that absurdism, I think, starts to creep in a bit. Now, I don't feel like I'm ready to rule that one out because I want to go through these others. I also like, in reading it a second time, I fully understand also how it's on the short list. And another reason why I could see it winning is that like, I think on reading it a third time, you're going to get even more, right? Maybe, but that's interesting because I also think that some of it, because of their elements of the absurdism in part two, and maybe the second time you read it, it starts to come into sharper focus, like what she's doing. What are you getting in the deeper reading of part three, or of what are you getting in a third reread? That's interesting. Arguing with myself. It's also hard because like I love her so much, and like I do love the book. Agnostic of this like contest, right? Okay. Now, and I guess to say, like, if we're pointing out things that I think could be stumbling blocks, I do think the little bit of absurdism that we face, or seemingly absurdism, something that I've not been able to put a better word to than absurdism. In part two, there's like a section where the protagonist comes back to her home and she can tell something's off, and like the father and the son and even the son's girlfriend are like engaging in some sort of like weird playtime, right? Like the father is like on the floor. Like that is the piece that to me bordered on absurdism, which I didn't necessarily mind, but I don't know if I was able to like ground myself in fully how we got there, unless it's like, is it like a return to the child's youth? But there was just something there that like, I could see if it doesn't fully work for you and it didn't fully feel grounded, how that could be a potential stumbling block that you're looking for, right? When you're coming back to the work. In the same way that Land in Winter, when Irene goes to the home for girls, where that is like a stumbling block to see like how those work. So yeah. Okay. The Honker and a Half, the Sonny and Cher show, the loneliness of Sonia and Sonny, by another diva, Miss Kieran Desai. I love it. It's an epic. I think it is so beautiful. I'm so happy that it is shortlisted. I think it is so deserving. I talked about this work a little bit in terms of like astrology, right? Like the sun sign is that it's a love story, which is kind of like what it shows to the world. The rising sign, which is like what it grows into and kind of like really what it is internally, is this like fable. And then the moon sign, which is like how it processes emotion, is this like beautiful tale of loneliness. And I really do think that the author has taken that trifecta and like triangulated those elements in a way that creates this 360-degree work. Now, there are, so yeah, and I think it's beautiful and I think it's wonderful, and like I love the tale and the epicness of it. I have talked to some folks and there has been like a little bit of discussion around the number of characters at the beginning of the work and the weight and importance that they felt as the reader, and like that they didn't necessarily engage with some of the family exploration that was explored. So I think that is interesting. How would I feel about reading that a second time? I would actually probably like it more because I know that it's coming. I didn't necessarily have that critique because I took this very slowly. This is, I mean, it probably, I don't know if you can see how beat up it is. The pages have dried, but like, this was like, I brought this to the pool weekend after weekend. I allowed this to just wash over me. My suggestion for this also is for you, if you haven't read it yet, to just take it very slowly. There is also I could see a world where as it is like growing into its rising sign of being this like fairy tale fable, we do engage with more and more elements of magical realism. And so I could see a world where if the that doesn't resonate with you, that could be a critique for someone of this work. For me, I thought it was handled really well. And I'm not a big like magical realism girly, but I do feel like it was integrated in a seamless, intelligent way. So for me, I was like, oh, I'm down. And it also happened, I think, the like true magical realism elements when it like really leans into that space, it's way further into the work. And so like she had already built my trust. So yeah. So again, like I could see that being like a potential hurdle again that someone might be looking for as they're going through this, either at the beginning because of the characters and if they're not resonating with those stories, or the lean into magical realism towards the end of the book. Similar to, you know, these other small hurdles that we've seen, potential hurdles that others that we talked about in the other two. So, yeah. Then we have Flesh. I read Flesh and Audition before the long list came out. I love Flesh. Flesh was going into the long list was already one of my favorite books of the year. It would have been fun to reread this. I'm not a big rereader, if I'm being honest. I did it for Audition because like I wanted to get hearing Katie Kitamura talk about that the like rabbit duck of it all, like that I was like, oh well I have to. And also I think Audition kind of leaves you with a like, wait, what happened? Right? And so like I knew I needed to go back and read it. And Flesh is one of those where it's like I know I would get more out of rereading it, but it's not one of those that leaves you with like oh my God, I have to. Okay. So at the jump, so right at the beginning, this, what I would argue is like something that is traumatic for the protagonist happens. And it was interesting. I think I was reading some comments online from a therapist or a professional that was saying that this sort of the reaction to that trauma that we see through the rest of the work felt very true to them and felt very authentic. And I don't have that area of expertise, so I kind of took their word for it. If you agree, disagree, please let me know. But the character itself felt very authentic for me. The prose is like shockingly sparse, which I think takes an immense amount of artistry and care and attention for something to work this well and be this sparse. Yeah. The book chronicles his, after this traumatic event and like where life takes him, which literally it's where life takes him because he's kind of like a passive participant in so much of his life. And for me, it worked. There is a world where, like, if we're picking out hurdles, where like it might move a little slowly once we start to move into his adulthood, right? Like, I think things start to get just like a little bit, like, oh, okay, we could propel this a little bit further. Again, you can make an argument, and I think that I did to myself while I was reading it, that like that is the character. Right. So it kind of made sense to me, but I think that could be a valid criticism. Also, like, I know some folks that didn't like it because it was so sparse. So like, if that doesn't resonate with you, fine. I do think though that like, and I think it was Sarah Jessica Parker maybe who had said, I think when they were announcing the shortlist, I think it's the word sure. I forget. I think he says sure over and over again. Or yeah. I think it might be, maybe it's yeah. That like, she was like, never did I know that word could mean so many different things. In that way, I think it's interesting because like I would imagine on another read, these singular words mean something else. And like, what a way to craft a work where a single word can have a different meaning every time you read it in theory, right? Or a deeper meaning. I think that, beautifully crafted sentences can do that, but I think singular words that's pretty spectacular, right? Okay. So I think the Land and Winter little hurdle for me, again, by being very, very picky, might take it out of the running. But again, okay, so for me, I wouldn't be upset or surprised if any of these four won. I would be so excited. I could see a world where Land and Winter is pulled out because of that, which really hurts because I love that book. I love all of these, which is why it's actually, this is a little hard because it feels like I'm like criticizing works that I have so much respect for. So take all of this with just like, this is like love on love on love. I don't know if I have fully grounded myself in this slight moment of absurdism here. To me, though, it is overshadowed by the rest of it. So that's where I'm waffling there. I liked the way that the magical realism was handled, but did I like it more than the way this like cis straight male was handled and like depicted in such a fascinating lens, right? Like, I don't know. And I think that like everyone had such a different commentary on humanity, which I thought was really interesting. This is a really strong year for me. And I know people have their opinions. I think these four, I loved reading these four. I actually had read Audition and Flesh before the long list, and I had requested an arc of the lonely, to be very transparent, of the loneliness of Sonia and Sunny before the long list came out. So like I knew I wanted to read that. I was very interested in that. I had already read two of these. I loved The Land and Winter. And actually, I think that there's a world where at least two of the long list could have replaced these two that I was kind of like just didn't resonate with me. And I would have been just like over the moon loving it. So, and I know everybody has their own opinions, and like every year everyone's going to have their own opinions about the long list and the short list, right? But like for me, I thought it was a strong list. But I think it's also hard because they're so different. It sounds like the speech from Devil Wears Prada, right? It's hard because they're so different and they hold up this similar belts. Yeah. So I think, well, I think it's for sure between Audition, The Sunny and Cher Show, and Flash. I could see a world where Flesh is the easier one for folks to agree on. Where I could see a world where that's what it is. I think Flesh is going to win because it's easier for folks to agree on it holistically. And I think the like hurdle here is easier for folks to jump over together. Where there is a world where I think, again, the Land and Winter hurdle for me is a little more difficult to get over because I'm just like, oh, that just didn't quite work for me. And we were there in that Home for Girls for for a hot minute. You know what I mean? And I could see a world where there are parts of Audition that collectively folks would have a harder time jumping over that hurdle with. And I could see a world where there were parts of Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny that, again, the collective would have a hard time maybe all agreeing on like leaping over that hurdle together. So I think that's my final thoughts, which really is hard. I really love all of these books. these four specifically, I really love them. So this is actually like a really difficult conversation, which might sound so silly, but I also just like have such reverence and respect for the art and the like effort and the energy that has gone into creating these works. And so it like at this point with the ones that I love this much, it feels like a, you know what I mean? Like a lot to try to like dissect all of that. So we're just talking about this in good fun, and like good art brings us to a point where we can have these like cool dynamic conversations about it, because again, it's not about being right. It's about like having dynamic conversations about art. Like this is art. This is capital A art. You know what I mean? So like we're having dynamic conversations about this because they are so beautiful and because they are so good. But I think I'm done arguing with myself for today. Will I change my mind after I post this? Probably. Will I change my mind like tomorrow? Yeah, definitely. So here we are. I think that calculus makes sense to me. And we are going to see on Monday, November 10th, what the judges think, right? I have had so much fun, which, quick side note, I'm sure we're going to come back and talk about the winner, because like, how could we not? Even if it's like in a short. But yeah. So anyways, I have had so much fun this Booker season chatting with y'all, and I hope that you have had a good time too. This has just been so special to me, and I love connecting with you all in the comments. It has been like, y'all are great. So share, like, comment, tell your friends, tell your enemies, and I will see you next week.